Welcome to the Tactical Cyber Podcast, where we transform strategic cyber insights into actionable tactics for everyday implementation. Join your hosts, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Darren Mott and Risk Advisory Practice Leader at Warren Averett, Paul Perry. Together, they bring decades of experience from the front lines of cybersecurity and risk management to help business owners and individuals take the actions that will keep their business and personal digital data safe. Each episode, we delve into the world of cybersecurity, sharing real-world experiences, expert interviews, and practical tips to safeguard your digital landscape. It's time to move past cyber strategies and start working cyber tactics.
Hello, friends, and those braving this live stream on a Thursday, June 20th, 24. This is the inaugural episode of the Tactical Cyber Podcast, the podcast that replaces the Cyber Guy podcast. For those over here, thank you so much for taking the time to pop in. I am Darren Mott, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent. And the genesis for this podcast, for those who don't know, I sometimes do news articles or news hits on Newsmax, and they sent me one regarding a cyber strategy by the Department of State. It was called the International Cyber Strategy. And so that really irritated me because when I think of cyber strategies or cyber help in any kind of form, the State Department is not the first place I go to. So that was what brought me to this idea to create this podcast, to bring in experts from around the cyber world to kind of talk about, here's what we forget talking about the strategies. Let's talk about things we can do to protect yourself, your business, and your family online. But I'm not doing this alone anymore. Cyber Guy was a kind of a lone thing. Now I have a guest host, and I want to bring in my guest host, Paul Perry. Paul, thanks so much for volunteering
Darren,
for this event.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. Glad to be here.
So, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. Paul Perry, work with Warren Averett, an accounting firm based in the Southeast, based out of Birmingham, Alabama. Spend a lot of my time doing cybersecurity assessments, risk assessments, internal control work. Was a financial auditor by trade, but also did a lot in the information security space. Do a lot of presentations around cybersecurity. A lot of article writing, because I think education is the most important thing. Darren and I have talked about that for many years, is just educating folks on what they need to know and what they need to do. And Tactical Cyber Podcast is really about what are we actually doing. And so we're looking forward to the discussion. So thanks for having me, Darren, and glad to be here.
All right. So one of the things we want to do with this podcast, kind of talk quickly at the beginning about some current news items that are of importance. So you had one that you brought, and I had one that I brought. We'll go to yours first. So bring up yours and why it's kind of important for entities, especially those who sell cars, to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you didn't see the articles, there's a bunch of them out there on CDK Global, the software as a service that about 15,000 car dealerships use that software to do everything that they do, from selling new cars to maintenance and scheduling of that nature. So they went down yesterday. They may actually have gone down again today. But I think the biggest piece, and still triaging, still trying to figure out what happened, and that'll come later on. But the biggest piece is car dealerships, since they technically are a supplier of finance to the people who buy cars, they fall up under the same rules as financial institutions. So the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, that's been around for a while, that financial institutions have been having to follow for years about what they need to do from a security perspective, the controls they need to have in place, the responses they need to have. Car dealerships have to follow that too. So I think we're going to hear more about CDK globally, in my opinion, going forward, because the federal aspect of it and GLBA will come into play. And what controls did they have or not have in place? And so it'll be an interesting one that continues on, and it's just going to be a article that continues to pop up, I would say, over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I look forward to hearing what happened, how it happened, and how they found it. They did realize there was an issue and then took everything down. So it'll be interesting to hear.
So let's do this since Chase is here, our guest. Let's get right to him. I don't want to waste a lot of his time, and we will come back to the news at the end and maybe talk a little bit more into that and some other new stuff, and we'll go there. So let me bring in our inaugural guest. And when I started coming up with wanting to do this podcast, he was the first name that came to mind. He is known as Dr. Zero Trust. He is Dr. Chase Cunningham. Chase, I think you're muted though, or maybe I muted you. Nope.
No, that's me.
Nope, still there? There you go.
Yeah, you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you. I
There we
got
go.
you.
All right.
You froze there for a second, so
Internet is internet, you know.
yeah. And I got to say, I'm using StreamYard because you use StreamYard. Look, it works for his podcast. Let me see if I can get this to work. I'm sure that there will be a lot of hiccups. So for those of you who are watching the live stream, I apologize for me messing through this. But Chase, thanks again for taking the time to come in. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, give your background. You've been on the Cyber Guy podcast a couple of times. I've been on yours. But for those who don't know, introduce yourself to the tactical cyber world.
Cool. So yeah, I'm a retired Navy chief. I was a cryptologic guy my whole career. Went to work for Fort Meade after that. I was at Forrester Research, did a bunch of their zero trust work and pushed that out to the market. I've done advisory with the federal government, the White House, and a bunch of other organizations, and published 7 books and got 6 patents, and just, stay busy.
Yeah, and I know that I follow you a lot on LinkedIn. We have a lot of the same responses to certain data breaches. So that's why I thought we were kind of kindred spirits when this came up. So how did you feel about the State Department International Strategy on Cyber?
I mean, I read, it's long and there's a lot of words in there. I don't feel that there's a whole lot of teeth to it. I think that that's really what we're missing with the majority of these publications now, is they're coming up and it's just regurgitation of the same word vomit we had a number of years ago. And now it's like, well, let's keep validating that we've said something important, but we're not doing anything. That's the issue that I have, is the action side of this. I mean, how much more proof do we need? The stuff that's going on. The last time I did an advisory on Capitol Hill, I asked the question, Senator, if a bunch of Russians parachuted out of a plane around a hospital right now and went in and started locking it down, is that an act of war? And they were like, absolutely. And I said, so what are we doing in the digital space? Because that's what's happening.
Right. And it's funny with that strategy. You know how many times zero trust is mentioned? One time.
One time. Hey, one is better than none. So
diversity, equity, and inclusion, 25 times.
Well, we got to take care of that. That's super important, right?
They did, and they used encryption once as well.
Okay, so we have 2 technical terms, and okay.
Yeah.
Wins.
Right. So go ahead, Paul. I'll let you go to the next.
Yeah, absolutely, Chase. Good to meet you. I have followed you through Darren, and it's glad to meet you and talk about this today. And I know zero trust is really one of those things that's frequently talked about. It's a framework that for the last several years, and in May of 2021, the president issued an executive order which required federal agencies really to adopt zero trust. Moving past any strategic intent, what are the key things businesses really should know about zero trust and really how to implement it? And that's probably the key question on most people's mind.
I mean, it's one of those things where if you look at the volume of research that we have, and I'm like a data geek. It drives my wife nuts. Like if she asks me something, I'm like, where's the data? It literally everything I do. So you've got the Verizon Dibber and the Mandiant Introns report that are published every year. Those are biblical references, in my opinion. It's been the same way people have been compromised for 10 years straight, to within like 3 percentage points. So you take care of identity, you take care of access, you take care of microsegmentation, and put MFA in place. And oh, by the way, people suck at passwords and not clicking stuff on the internet. Things, and you've solved 90-something% of the problem. You want to stop ransomware? If you're not using PowerShell, turn off PowerShell. Like, this stuff is not rocket science, but we've got the self-licking ice cream cone of misery where this market is created by the vendors that say you got to have the next shiniest, super cool AI powered blah, blah, blah. When in reality, the majority of what you need to do is blocking and tackling, and then you go forward from there. I mean, it just, at the enterprise level, sure, it's a bigger problem, but still the basics matter.
And
makes sense.
Yeah, who's doing the best? Who's doing the best at it, right? Is there, if you were to look at, okay, if you're going to do it the way this organization is doing it, who's successfully like implementing to the point where you're saying those guys are the gold standard for implementing this methodology?
I mean, to me, it's Google. And the reason I say that is Google got their ass handed to them in Op Aurora. And basically they took a step back from Op Aurora and said, okay, we need to re-engineer, recalibrate, whatever. And they changed things up. And they have 188,000 regular employees plus another 500,000 contractors and subcontractors and partners. And when's the last time you heard about a Google data breach? Because they've moved to ZT, and they operate on, when you're just Google campus, you're on the Wi-Fi, like they treat it like a Starbucks network. Everybody has Chromebooks that doesn't need a super powered whatever. Like it's It's not perfect, but it is very well put together, and it actually works. They don't even call it zero trust, by the way. They call it beyond trust, which fine, whatever, who cares? That's your thing. You can call it cyber tiddlywinks. It doesn't matter. Just do the right thing and put the right controls in place. But they work. They operate at the functional level that they need to, and it's proven. I mean, when was Aurora? 12 years ago? 12 years, and that's a global company with very valid reasons to be targeted by APTs. Zero breach. What more proof do you want?
So how come they aren't selling that deployment version, right? How come they don't have or maybe they are and I'm not paying attention, but you'd think if they're working it, they should, okay, how do we monetize this now? We will show you.
They've got a version that they've monetized that you can kind of go put through, but really where they're monetizing it is with Google Cloud and Google Cloud services. And to their credit, they just kind of say like, look, here's all the things that we've got. If you go look at our page on how we do ZT, this is what we do. And by the way, all of Google services are enabled here. You can use those things. If you do, great. If you don't, whatever, plays well with others. But they've monetized it in that fashion. It to me, like when I consult, I do a lot of like pro bono work with orgs that have been breached. The first thing that I start trying to do is to get them to migrate to G Suite and G Services. And by the way, Google's not paying me a royalty on this. So just, FYI, there's no compensation. It is what it is, and it works. It's just using stuff tactically that actually solves the problem.
So what do you do if you're not a Google? Trace, what do you do if you're a small business? How can they implement kind of that piece of it? And there is a part, and you started to talk about it, and it's something I talk about a lot of times, is the inconvenience of zero trust, right? But how do small businesses do that?
Well, I mean, really what they should be doing is they should be partnering with MSPs and MSSPs that can help them do that, because this is not a part day, 5 minutes a day type thing. Like, you need to be engaged and active 24/7. And honestly, if you're not doing cyber, why would you kind of half try and do cyber? Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I could go fix my water softener, but I got other stuff to do. I'm going to call a plumber to come do it. So like, I'm not going to try and be a cyber guy that, does water softener installation. That's just stupid. So these organizations should be using MSPs, partners, and those. And then what I would also say is, why in today's world do most of you that aren't programmers or admins need super powerful, crazy enabled Dell laptops with blah, blah, blah like that? Just move to Chromebooks, move to browser isolation, offload all that crap. Like, life gets better for you. So is it perfect? Absolutely not. Does that mean you'll never have a breach or compromise? Hell no. But is it a smarter approach that uses resources more intelligently? Absolutely. And twice on Sunday.
Right. And I think that inconvenience is why, and I why people just don't want to do it.
I mean, change sucks. It doesn't matter what you do. Change in anything sucks. That's why gym memberships sell the most from January to March, because nobody wants to go after March. I go to the gym 5-6 days a week. Come April 1st, it's just me in there. So like, it's because change sucks and everybody expects immediate results.
Well, I think everybody wants an easy button.
Oh yeah.
Don't tell me, don't make it difficult. Just tell me what's the thing I have to do that I can push a button and all my problems are solved.
Yeah, because that works everywhere, right? I mean,
exactly right.
Yeah. It's just interesting, because this is also like, I love research on warfare and those types of things. This is the only space that I've been able to find where the adversaries literally tell us, and we have entire groups dedicated to the research of tactics, techniques, and procedures, and they tell us what's going to happen for a decade straight, and people sit around wondering how to solve the problem. Like, come on, man. I mean, how much more clear do you want? Would you like me to use crayons and construction paper?
Yeah. So I'm going to go off script here, because I thought of something as we're going through this. We could talk about zero trust for a half hour, right? But I think there's main points that we probably hit here. But one of your other big areas is leadership, right? You have a whole book on leadership. What's the title again? Because I can't remember, because it's very long.
Yeah, it's actually a kind of a longer book title, but it's actually, you can't be an author and not have your book available, right? So it's How Not to Lead: Lessons Every Manager Can Learn from Dumpster Chickens, Mushroom Farmers, and Other Office Offenders.
Exactly. So let's move this to, I think good leaders have a strategic vision, but they also know how to tactically move into an area that makes them smarter in the cyber world, right? So how do you recommend companies find those leaders, build those leaders, or is that just another big gap area we have in addition to finding personnel to do the cyber stuff? Finding the leaders to do it is hard too.
I mean, I think the real disservice that we're doing to each other is that we've built this industry around this brand of you have to be a unicorn, ex-NSA, mega hacker, or whatever else to do this stuff. When in reality, that's not the truth. Like, that's why we also say we have a lack of human capital in the space, which I think is BS. And in reality, what you're trying to do is go. I just hired 2 people actually this last couple of quarters to do cybersecurity work. One of them came from sales, and the other person came from restaurant operations, and they're both doing just fine because they have the intellect and the aptitude and the willingness to figure this stuff out. I was a diesel mechanic in the Navy. I mean, like, I'm a farm boy from Central Texas. If I can figure this stuff out, anybody can. So that's really where the twist is people should open their mind up to, I don't need unicorns. I need people that are draft horses that are willing to do the work and have the interest and the intellect to figure problems out. If they can lead, great, but leadership can also be learned and taught as well.
And I think leaders have to be bought in too. And I think that's the one piece. Leaders who don't understand it don't get bought in because that's an IT thing. That's not something I'm going to worry about. And so I think leaders really have to, if you don't have the leader bought in, nobody else is going to follow, right?
Well, and I hate to break, here's a news flash because I actually just got the email this morning from the last committee that I submitted paperwork to. We've introduced some of the legislation now that's working its way up through the channels that will define negligence in cyber. So Guess what? If you're a leader and you're negligent, just like if you're, I don't know, building planes where the friggin' doors blow off, you're going to be liable for those problems. And you might wind up in an orange jumpsuit, which I fully support.
With the SEC for public companies, for the boards, they need to have somebody on the board now that understands cybersecurity, because
87 Americans died last year because of ransomware attacks on hospitals. 87 Americans died because we know unequivocally. And if like that's 87 people that shouldn't have died because somebody clicked something, and people sit around going like, well, is cyber real? Like, come on, man, are you kidding me? 86 people, 86 Americans. To me, as a veteran and everything else, like, it sticks in my craw that nearly 90 folks had to die because people don't take this stuff serious.
It's crazy.
So let's go to the hospitals. You brought up hospitals, right? Why are hospitals getting so pounded? Is it a combination of all of these things? They don't have a strategy, and they don't have tactics, and they don't have leaders.
I think it's bigger than that. Honestly, I think it's at the geopolitical level where we've seen the movement of Russia and China and the adversaries in this space to try and, first it was finances, and finances got hard because everybody protects money. And then they went towards oil and gas, and oil and gas has gotten a little harder. So they're just following down the row of easy, low hanging fruit. Now, luckily for them, they've finally found a space where they can cause kinetic damage to people via digital avenues. And that is actually starting to drive things forward, because if there's anywhere that people will pony up and pay a ransom or do something or whatever, it's going to be in a hospital when lives and when revenue and those things are on the line. So I mean, it's a perfect storm, and it's a perfect storm of the geopolitics and the position that we currently find ourselves in cyber. And then also in hospitals, I've done workshops with physician-owned hospitals, and literally the guy that ran the hospital was like, I don't care about cyber, I save lives. And I mean, that is the approach. It's like, can you save a life when your stuff ain't working? There's 86.
I've talked to many doctors that say, I'm here to treat my patients, not remember my password.
Yeah. And it's like, well, let me know how that goes.
You're not going to have any patients. You're not going to have any revenue.
Let me know how that works out for you in the long run. I mean, you have HIPAA data and high trust data, which financially makes you liable.
Right.
So, I mean, it's there's bigger, broader strokes here that are going on, and it's not beyond the pale for people to understand that there's no Geneva Conventions in cyber, and there's no armistice or whatever else. So everybody, everywhere, every nation state is playing against each other to find the next leg up. And when you're some of these countries, like, you take whatever you can get, and hospitals are there and they're easy. And also that's why you've seen an increase in schools and universities, low hanging fruit. massive impact, future state type of stuff. Why worry about winning a game that, you know, goes over every 4 years with an election cycle when I can go after the youth that are coming into the workforce in a decade?
Who care more about convenience than security.
And who grew up digitally, and they're
Right.
like, turn the internet off for a day in your house and watch what happens. In my house, it's absolute chaos.
Absolutely.
Doesn't your Wi-Fi reach out to the playground so when they're out on the swing, they can at least do their TikTok while they're doing it?
Well, mine are all older, so if I turn anything off, they all freak out. However, I will say, here's a tactical cyber thing for you. If you want to motivate your kids to do their chores, tie it to their access to the internet.
Absolutely.
I do it, and it works. My firewall is set up where there's a timer, and if they don't do it by a certain time, it just shuts off, and all of a sudden, no more chores.
So let's talk about that for a second. That's an interesting point. So I think with this podcast, I don't want it to be just business oriented, right? Because, you know, people have to stay protected at home too. So how do you have, and you have to give the specific examples like all your VMs, but how do you have your network set up? Like, what is your tactical approach to setting up your home network? Because I'm sure you have dozens of connected devices beyond just your desktop and your cell phone and your iPhone. And so you have your smart TVs and your Apple TVs and all that. So how does a normal user protect their home network successfully?
So I think there's kind of two ways that you could do that. One is if you work from home like I do, you can get your business internet. It's totally separate from your family line, which is a good thing. That's a good way to kind of keep the two parsed out, and you can do a lot more. And honestly, your bandwidth is going to be all you, which is a good thing too if your kids play games and whatever. But for most folks, I would say if you can get a business internet line, do that. It's actually a tax write-off. So there's your little bit of a tax advice from Dr. Zero Trust here. But the other side is make sure that you've got your router that comes from the internet provider. And very simple stuff like go on YouTube, go on Google, and figure out firewall rules and just do a couple basic firewall rules to carve things into subnets. You want and it sounds super nerdy and difficult. It's not, I promise you folks. Like if you can do basic mathematics, you can figure this stuff out. You just carve that off. You put those things, like in my network, we have OT, IoT stuff, we have kids stuff, and we have dad stuff. And that's pretty much how it's set up and run. And then for all the kids in the house, my oldest kid my oldest that have their own computers, I said, fine, you guys buy your own computers. You can have whatever cool things you want on it. Those live on the Wild West network, if you will. They're not touching anything else on my network. My other kids that are younger, they have Chromebooks because they can do everything in the cloud. So there that's kind of the way that I run it, and that's what it is. And it's my house. I pay the bills. You can either do it the way that I say it's going to work, or you can not, and you can write it on a piece of paper and send it with a homing gerbil. But that's what's up.
So you should do a YouTube channel just on that. Here's how you set up.
I mean, it's not super hard. I think there's Network Chuck actually. He's got a really good YouTube channel. I've watched a bunch of David Bombard or something. He's got a really good YouTube channel that you can just go look at, and he'll tell you literally, like, here's what you do. Here's how to walk through this. One thing to know, I'm not sure if people have Verizon or Comcast, but if you get your router from Verizon or Comcast, it is always set up for default config, whether or not they tell you. So as soon as you turn it on and plug it in, find out what your gateway is and log into it. It's probably going to be admin password, which is what you don't want, and go change that username and password. It takes 10 seconds and it is totally worth doing.
I'll give Google credit. I have Google Fiber, and theirs is completely different. It's a long password and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I've got Comcast, which I love Comcast, but the weird thing too was I set it up and secured it, but when we had a power outage, everything when it rebooted came back online in default, so I had to go back and fix that again. So
yeah. Paul,
I was going to go back to Zero Trust, but just because I want to hear success stories, because I think people want to know where has it worked. And outside of maybe the Google that we've talked about, and what can they be doing? Because usually when I hear how things work for other people, I can apply it to my own concept, whether it's my business or my personal. So any success stories there that you have off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few organizations that have moved to a ZT model that have done pretty well with it. I think there's some research that was published recently, like last year, that said that on average, an organization that has a ZT not like a full ZT build, but a ZT instantiation saves on average, I think it's like $1.25 million when a breach occurs, because breaches do occur. So it's isolation, segmentation, control, and being able to do those things. And then I worked with I can't say their name, but a cruise line that had a pretty, let's call it disjointed approach to cybersecurity. And they'd had 7 CISOs in 5 years, and they had, I think, they had like 58 security products in total. We moved them towards ZT and strategically approached the problem. They went from 58 solutions to 11, and they freed up like $3 million in junk. So, it's a very doable thing. And it was a little bit unpleasant for them to begin with, because the people that are in charge now had to go back and kind of say, like, remember all that stuff that they asked for? Yeah, a lot of it was not really useful. So, but you're freeing up money. Everybody likes to have a conversation about freed up money. Like, who doesn't like cash?
Well, I think you can apply that personally too. Just from how many things do you go and say, oh, it's the new shiny thing, I got to buy it? No, you don't. And I think that goes back to understanding the technology, because I think a lot of people don't understand what they're using. And I think if you even halfway understood what you were using, you would be applying it a little bit differently, or you would be looking for a different solution.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff too when you actually think about the real value of it. Like, is it really that valuable? Like, I mean, I have 2 Nest thermostats in my house. I got them just because it makes it easier for me to kind of keep things where I want for the control, during the year, and not running my batteries down and whatever. But it's like, I walk by my thermostats 30 times a day. I can change the temperature if I'm not lazy. Like, do I have to do it? Nah, but ease of use, fast risk, those types of things.
So you recently had, I don't know if it's your company or if it's a company that came out with a tool folks can use online to test software, right? So you want to talk a little bit about that? Let's pitch that product.
Yeah, so DemoForce, demo-force.com. And part of the reason that we built that was because if you've ever kind of got the old bait and switch when you go to a vendor's website where they have a little button that says demo, like click for demo, and it takes you to some form you fill out, and then you get an email from a salesperson, which nobody wants to talk to them. We pretty much built a platform where vendors can put their stuff into a VM. It's fully configured. All their documentation is there, all the usage and everything. And you just literally click and you're in it, and you start playing with the software. And because of the way we built the VM, at the end of the session, whatever you did nukes and goes away. It goes back to disk. So you get a real instantiation of the software, and you can do things connected to your network, try your passwords out on it, run exploits, whatever. It's a real living, breathing VM. So it's I liken it to being the difference between if you went to the car dealership and somebody said, oh, you want to test drive a Camaro? Cool. Install the transmission for me. And then Ricky, the sales dude's going to drive it for you. Nobody wants that. Whereas if you go and they toss you the keys and say, have a good day, when you come back later, let's sign some paperwork.
And is this similar? So, 2 years ago, maybe you told me about this site that did the virtual machines.
Yeah.
What was that called? It doesn't exist anymore, does it?
No, it doesn't. They got acquired by somebody and then pirated off. So yeah, that was an education specific thing. We kind of just re-engineered basically the whole system to make that where people can try the software out from vendors. And the vendor customers that I have are getting a lot more demos, a lot more at-bats, because like if you're a potential buyer, it's the difference between like if somebody, I read white papers all day, every day, because that's just what I do. I'm not going to buy your software. Like I'm a one-man shop at my house. But if I can go try the software and actually use it, and that my email address and all those other things, it's a way more valid lead for the vendor that somebody actually used your software instead of just, oh, they read our white paper, they must want to buy our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, the other value is we're able to kind of democratize the sales engineer issue, because you don't need sales engineers. Sales engineers can go off and do SE things. They don't have to do like Bobo demos for everybody. This is automation and orchestration that runs at scale. So if you want 1,000 sales engineers, you just spin up 1,000 DemoForce instances and you're off to the races.
So what does Zero Trust look like in the future? Does it change? Does it grow legs? Is it going to be the exact same because nobody can get it right today? They're not going to get it right in 5 years?
No, I mean, I think that honestly, to what you just said, I think that that's a misconception, right? Is that there is the level of right for ZT, in my opinion, is are you surviving when things go wrong, and do you have a better instantiation than the next person down the street? You know, it's like if my house is got an ADT sign out front and 2 Doberman, and people break into the house down the yard that has no ADT sign in Chihuahuas, hey, Chase wins. So we did our CT approach right. It's going to evolve over time. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is the consolidation of identity in the space, and that includes non-human identities, IoT, like everything has an identity now. So that's the big issue. And then the further side of that is sooner or later, people are going to stop pissing money away down the phishing training pipeline. And this is going to solve a lot of problems, and it's going to be part of a zero trust instantiation.
So your 2 biggest hashtags on LinkedIn are kill the VPN and kill the password.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we do that?
I mean, the VPN is so I always ask people, like, are you aware of the year that the VPN started to get use? And they say no, and I go, it's 1993. So, you know, the question I asked them was, would you run your business on 1993 software and think you're going to be operationally as good as everybody else? Well, no, absolutely not. Okay, then why are you using a VPN? So VPNs need to go away. ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access with policy, is a way better way to do that. And there's a bunch of people and capabilities that are out there. And then passwords. Passwords suck. Everybody gets them wrong. Just get off the password. Like, move, if nothing else, like at least move towards some sort of MFA on top of your password or some sort of external validation. For me, like when somebody says that MFA is too big a thing for them to deal with, it's like, then don't buckle your seatbelt anymore and please solve us all a problem. I get.
So I got to clarify. When you're saying you're talking business VPN. Like if I'm at Starbucks and I put a VPN on my phone, I'm hooked to their free wireless. Is that bad? You're saying don't use that?
I mean, it's your risk, right? So choose your own punishment. But I mean, I would say just be careful. And you know, to be perfectly honest, like when I travel internationally, because I don't have an option, I use a personal VPN just to make sure that I'm piping where I need to go. But that's different.
I mean personal VPN. I'm not saying business. I say personal VPN.
There's so far, to my knowledge, and maybe this is the next, super Israeli startup idea. Like there is not a personal ZTNA solution. There's some stuff that's starting to kind of creep in there, but it'd be great to see one where you can have the policy control and those other integrated solutions. Because your personal VPN, it's not much. It's very prophylactic, but it's better than nothing.
Right. Yep.
So if you're at Starbucks, turn it on. I mean, use it, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, so why won't people do MFA? I mean, there's a reason, there's a why. I mean,
why won't people stop smoking cigarettes? Why won't people? I mean, just for 1,000 reasons. Usually, it's lazy. It's because they've had one negative experience or heard about somebody that had a bad experience or whatever. And I have yet to run into a situation where it was an actual valid reason. It was always culture or we had a vendor that didn't deliver or something like that. It's like you've done it wrong, and it shouldn't be that hard. And I've been relatively passwordless for quite a while, and it's great. Like my phone uses my big ugly face to authenticate me, and I go on about my way. Like, and yes, you could argue, oh well, what if someone gets your biometrics? In the land of low-hanging fruit, stealing my biometrics is nowhere near as stealing my stupid password I've used 100 times over.
Right. That's what I say. I say, look, if someone has your phone and they're able to get into your password, if someone has your phone, your bigger problem is not
right.
If you face is what you use to get into your passwords, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, technically, even if it's the cops, right, they're supposed to follow along the constitutional guidelines for that. So there's some no-nos there too. So
yep.
I mean, you can't just be like, hey, look at your phone and we're going to authenticate you. That's it. So there's so much stuff in the space where it's not a real valid reason, especially like on the tactical level. The stuff that you need to put in place is not exceptionally difficult. The majority of it you could figure out yourself if you actually got off your ass and did some research. YouTube is a beautiful thing. Like it is what it is. We have an industry that has made itself out to be exceptionally complicated and sort of stovepiped for the very reasons of it generates revenue and income.
So as I like to say, we want to be here for a good time, not a long time. So we've had you for a half hour, so I don't want to take up too much of your afternoon. So tell us your what are your big things coming up? You got another book coming out. So talk about some of your books. Like Gabriel is a good good fiction book, right?
Oh,
Is there a
thank you.
follow-up?
Yeah.
Isn't it cliffhanger?
Yeah, I left it off at a cliffhanger. Working on the second version now. Somebody at RSA told me they hated it, so I was like, all right, I guess I should take that for feedback. Yeah, and then I've got the leadership book. I've got the cyber warfare thing. I just enjoy writing, so I whether or not somebody reads it or not, I could care less. I'm going to write it and publish it, and if it goes, great. If it doesn't, then whatever. I mean, maybe Netflix will look it up and be like, hey, that Gabriel thing is a really cool idea, because Lord knows they made some trash movies. I could come up with a better script.
You need to make a cybersecurity comedy sitcom. That's what we need.
Oh, that would, that would be.
It would write itself. It would just write itself.
Right? Yeah, you could just follow the headlines and have ChatGPT write the script.
That's all you got to do.
Paul, you got anything else?
I got nothing else, Chase. This was good conversation. I think zero trust is something a lot of people don't understand, and I think putting light on it, adding commentary to it is important. So thank you.
So real quick, just I wanted to, because this is something people get wrapped up around. If you fly on the airlines in the U.S., you've operated in a zero trust environment every time you've done it. And if you've flown, is it really that miserable and makes it that, like, would you not go to where you went because you had to do the things you did to get on the airplane? No, that's why the airline industry exists. So just think about that the next time somebody's getting ready to moan about ZT. You've done ZT in your everyday life if you've been on a plane.
It's a great point.
Yeah, but you say that, but I just watched the TSA version of South Park this morning while I was working out. So you know, it's
the toilet safety administration. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's one of my favorite episodes ever. Yeah.
Well, Chase, thanks so much. I wanted part of me
Chase.
wanted to have you on so I could ride your coattails, right? So I could ride your follower coattails on this. So I appreciate you coming on. Hopefully you'll come on in the future too.
No, anything I could do to help. Yeah,
right?
love the tactical cyber. Darren and Paula, you guys are awesome, and thank you so much for inviting me, especially for the first episode. Like that huge honor. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Chase.
you. Thanks, Chase. All right, so you can follow Chase. I'll post up his information here one more time. So thanks again for him for popping on. Where did that go? I think it's right here. Yep. So he has a weekly podcast. He didn't mention it. It's called the Weekly-ish Cybersecurity and Zero Trust Market Analysis Podcast. So you can check him. He
likes those long titles.
He does. Yeah, exactly right. So Paul, let's get back to the news part, because and at some point we'll have this down to a better science, right? Because the first episode to be a bunch of jump around. So going back to your initial article, so I meant to ask this, I don't think I did. So if you're let's take, so the hard part here is, right, who's going to know? So that's the biggest issue that we see with cybersecurity is awareness, right? So we can talk about news articles all the time. So you're talking about, this is an important thing, especially for car dealers who have to now follow GLBA and all that. Is that right? Graham Leach.
Right. You got it right.
Yeah. And protect the information. So, but how are they going to find out? How do we help the car and industry know that this is a problem? And
unfortunately, it takes events like this for the information to come up. I think you've got to have somebody at your car dealership that's concerned about cyber issues and keeping up to date with what's going on. There's legislation that's going out all the time, and so I think it's what is it? What's your hashtag? Knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is
protection. Knowledge is protection,
right? And so if you know about it, that's the important piece. I think to some of what Chase said, people just don't want to know about it because it's technical stuff. I don't really care about that, but you've got to get rid of that. So unfortunately, I think industries across the nation, an event like this wakes people up. Oh, I got to do something, right? And so for the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of what are we not doing? And then if leadership doesn't care, it goes away. And so you've got to go back to what a little bit of what Chase said about leadership is they've got to care, they've got to understand, they've got to follow with it. And again, you have to understand what kind of business you're in. If universities are no different. If you provide loans of some kind, financial assistance or loans to people, in some form or fashion, you are considered a financial institution. And so following those same protocols, those requirements, they may be a little bit too much for you as a small business compared to a true financial institution, but you still got to be doing something. And I mean, you got to do something differently every day. And so how do they know about it? It takes events like this, unfortunately.
And do you think there'll be, and here's the question I always ask when we talk about debris, will there be a postmortem? Will there be an after action? Here's how they got in, here's what they did, because now it's a third party cloud provider. Is that correct? Right. So chances are the vulnerability that was used to get in was probably spearfish anyway, but whatever it's probably not going to be replicated across car dealers. But the health industry, a big thing. If you take a look at Ascension, you take a look at Change Healthcare, chances are the vulnerabilities that are found on those are probably found in hundreds, if not thousands, of medical entities across the country. Yet we still don't know really how any of it got in. Or did I take that back? Didn't one of the hacker groups come out and say, here's how we did it?
Well, I think Ascension, I think something came out about how Ascension did get it. Somebody clicked the link that they shouldn't have, right? And so there was malware that was, I think what I read was there was malware downloaded, obviously from a link, probably from an email. But so, I think the postmortem piece definitely is something that gets lost. But I would say society and individuals within society, there's so many articles. Why do I have to go read all of them? It's just another hack. Well, I mean, that would be my conversation of, you have to read it so you know what happened, so that when it happens again or it happens to you, you know how to stop it, or you at least know how to recognize it. And I think that's the piece of knowledge is protection, is if you know about it and you know what to look for, hopefully you can protect yourself to some degree.
Yep. So here's my article. See if I can bring it up here. Nope, that's not going to work because I don't have it set in my first. Anyway, it's from Cyber News, and the headline is Baltimore, one of America's deadliest cities. Not that that should really matter. Leaks the identities of residents who reported crimes. So if you live in Baltimore and you reported a crime, 13.5 million complaints have been compromised. So since 1989, so if you filed a complaint since 1989, your information is now out there, and it has to do with because they had some system on their publicly accessible Kibana instance belonging to the city of Baltimore was discovered, and the exposed data breach did not have authentication or authorization systems to protect it against unauthorized access. So basically anybody could have gone out and found it. But how many times do we have, I mean, I've been doing the Cyber Smart Morning News update, shameless plug, for 9 months now, almost 10 months. And how many times I've said this exact line for different things is craziness. I mean, do you need a postmortem? You don't need a postmortem because they're telling you right here, here's how it happened.
Right. But that's how it happened. But then how did they not find this 5 years ago?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You're
I mean,
right.
2019 was the last time Baltimore got hit. And how did it not come up then? Somebody wasn't looking at something, or there was a new, somebody said, hey, somebody sold on the dark web, hey, here's a new vulnerability, go try that. And that's what they found. So it's crazy how even the postmortems sometimes don't help.
Yeah. So I have mentioned in my Substack writing and some other stuff why I did this podcast. So why don't we, and I didn't ask you, so I asked you, you're the first person I asked to co-host with this, and you immediately said yes. So give me your vision of what we want to do here with this podcast as we go forward.
I mean, I think the vision of this podcast for Tactical Cyber Podcast is really the actionable items that people can be doing daily basis from a business perspective and from a personal perspective to try and protect yourself. We always say it's one of the tenets of cybersecurity is there's not a silver bullet. It's going to happen. It's how you respond once it happens, and it's how you're able to overcome once it happens, right? And so, but that takes tactical pieces. We can talk about it, and we do talk about it, and the education is there, but we've got to put stuff into place. And I would hope that people who listen to this podcast, watch these videos, hopefully you are walking away with, that there's something that I can implement today. If you heard nothing else, multi-factor authentication, right? Whatever you have, whether it's your credit card, whether it's your phone, whatever it is, multi-factor authentication, right? So I think it's what can we do to try and, we have to be right 100% of the time, right? Businesses, individuals, the hackers have to be right once, right? And that's all it is. So we have to continually do things to protect ourselves. And that's what I hope people get from this podcast.
Awesome. I couldn't say it any better myself. So tell us a little bit about Warren Averett. Tell us about your role and how Warren Averett can help people in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. So Warren Averett, I lead our risk advisory and assurance practice. So anything control related, whether it's financial, operational, technology in nature, we help with reviewing and assessing what their current status is, and then what they need to be doing to try and protect themselves. And so that's really how we can help is the knowledge of where do you need to shore things up, what tactical things do you need to do, and we look at 400 companies a year as it relates to IT in some form or fashion, or cybersecurity, and so we see what's done right, we see what's done wrong, a lot of what's wrong. And so we've got to continually help people to try and protect themselves and protect their people and educate their people on what they need to do. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. At the bottom scroll there is where you can find Paul on LinkedIn, where you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can email me, Darren at the Cyber Guy, cyber spelled CYBUR. If you have questions, thoughts, or comments on the podcast, if you have ideas for other guests, let us know. I have about 9 or 10 in the pipeline to come on. So we will do this every 2 weeks, more or less. Will it be exactly every 2 weeks? Unlikely, but that's what we're shooting for. Try to do it at least twice a month. I don't think I could personally, in my current, with all the current stuff I'm doing, keep it to once a week, but hopefully twice a month is what we're shooting for. Paul, thanks again. Enjoy your weekend and have a happy 4th of July. And this stream will be up on YouTube and LinkedIn for however long it stays up on those things. And the podcast version will be available at all your favorite podcast providers as soon as I put it together and throw it out. Paul, thanks again. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, and everybody stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Tactical Cyber Podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their respective employers. If you have thoughts, comments, or suggestions on the Tactical Cyber Podcast, email Darren at thecyberguy.com. You can also follow Darren and Paul on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Darren Mott or linkedin.com/in/Paul M. Perry CPA. Paul Perry is a member of Warren Averett CPAs and Advisors, where he leads the firm's risk advisory and assurance services team, a group dedicated to optimizing businesses' financial, operational, and technology controls so that organizations can make strategic choices for sustained growth. Learn more at warrenaverett.com. Stay safe, stay secure, and we'll see you next time.